Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from LastCar.info coming at you from the conclusion of the race at the Road America track, the next road course race, and the next first time winner. Unofficially, has now had Tyler Reddick come back from all those second place finishes to now be our third straight first time winner at a road course, following Daniel Suarez and Ross Chastain, the teammates at Coda and back at Sears Point. Kind of an unusual race. I mean, obviously, certainly given compared to what we had in Saturday's race for the Xfinity Series, a bit more of a calm event. No cautions for anything beyond the stage breaks, and a bit unusual how it played out. But ultimately settled by the two best cars in the field. Chase Elliott seemed to have the best car right from the start, despite his complaints about a steering issue before the race even began. And then, especially after the second stage, Tyler Reddick was the only one that seemed really able to kind of keep up with him and capitalize at the right time. And kudos to the NBC crew for actually showing the battle for position, even when the top two weren't originally scored as the leaders. Definitely taking a cue from that terrible miscue that Fox had back at the Charlotte race, where they missed the much of the battle between the top two drivers coming off of pit road from JR Motorsports, instead of showing the other drivers that were up front. So a lot of positives and negatives to certainly talk about, and we'll also talk about the Xfinity Series race as well as a couple other topics. I want to definitely get into Kyle Busch's movie that came out this week. I just talked a little bit about it on Twitter, but we'll get into that more on the show this evening. Not a great day for Kyle Busch at the slightest. So that was definitely the situation that you had there with him. But unofficially, your race results here: Tyler Reddick with his first career victory over Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson. Ross Chastain in the fourth spot ahead of his Trackhouse teammate Suarez. Chris Buescher keeping going what he had back at Sears Point with the runner-up finish back there. Finishes sixth in this race ahead of Austin Cindric. Michael McDowell, he was my fantasy pick for this week. Had a great qualifying run. Seemed like he was just kind of slowly losing spots through the event, however. I couldn't quite keep that top five run like he had back at Sears Point. He ends up back in the eighth spot here, but still ahead of AJ Allmendinger and Kevin Harvick, rounding out your top 10. At the same time, we had a bit of a last place battle that was interesting. And first and foremost, I want to give a big thanks to our William Saki, our staff writer at the website there, who was covering the action this weekend. In fact, at this point, he's still working the track there this weekend. We'll get some more notes from him as the article gets co-written tonight about what is unofficially Loris Hezemann's first last place finish in the NASCAR Cup Series. We'll see what happens with technical inspection and everything and so forth. Yeah, he did a lot of great work this weekend. The article that he and I co-wrote for the Xfinity race yesterday is already online, and he was able to get a good interview with Will Rogers after his last place run there. We'll certainly talk about that race at the same time. But at the back of the field, very unusual. Start of the race, Corey LaJoie unable to take the green flag, at least at the same time as everybody. Showed about a 3-second gap between him and the rest of the field, crossing the stripe initially, but didn't actually complete that first lap. It seemed, at least from the pictures that were provided, that he had actually pulled into the garage area on that opening lap, and it just happened to be about 8 seconds back of the field there. That seemed to be the indication, rather than him actually being on the track to take the green flag on the course with everyone else. The reports seemed to indicate a steering issue. NASCAR.com seemed to confirm that as well. When William came up there, it seemed to indicate possibly an engine problem as well. Regardless, he didn't actually start the race until about 5 or 6 laps into it, at which point we had everybody still running at the same time. Loris Hezemans had an extended pit stop and then ended up pulling behind the wall. There was a lot of attention given to the rear deck or the fuel cell area. That certainly seems indicated by NASCAR eventually reporting him out of the race with a fuel pump problem. We've seen this a lot, especially with motorsports business management teams in the past, but this time around with Team Hesberg's effort, ultimately was something that they couldn't overcome. It seemed like they were going to get back out there. I think for a team like that, as an open team, there was certainly a possibility of them getting back out there and treating the rest of the races maybe a test session for what they would, one of their future races. I would anticipate that they'd be back at either the Indy Road Course or Watkins Glen or one of these other events coming up. Although I was very surprised that they didn't make the trip out here to Sears Point with just the 36 chartered entries out there. It really shows like how narrow the margins are for these open teams out there. But unfortunately, not much of a race there for Hesman's team. I don't think he was even shown once in the broadcast there, but ends up completing only 9 laps of the event and finishing in the 37th spot. Another rough run for Josh Bilicki, although he had a decent run in the Xfinity race on Saturday, ends up at the 36th spot there, 10 laps down. But still actually completed 52 laps of the race, getting back out there, I believe at the end of stage 2. It sounded like it was about that time. I didn't hear NASCAR confirm him getting back out there, but he did actually complete some more laps. LaJoie climbs only to the 34th spot, getting ahead of Bubba Wallace, who apparently had a brake issue there when he pulled off the track in turn 5. Wallace ends up at the 35th spot after his last place run at Sears Point. Road courses once again still being a struggle for him, even this year. At least these last couple of them have. And then he had the wheel come off at Coda as well. I guess really all of them have been kind of a struggle for him this season. Brad Keselowski rounding out the bottom 5 there. You saw him celebrating with Tyler Reddick at the finish, but Keselowski himself had a bit of a difficulty out there, bouncing off the wall, I believe around Canada corner, finishing 4 laps down in the 33rd spot behind Cody Ware. Ware was the only other driver in the field that spent any time behind the wall. Not exactly sure what the issue was with him, but he finished 3 laps down in the 32nd spot. Austin Dillon and Kyle Tilley, the only other drivers off the lead lap. Kyle Busch very nearly lapped. You actually saw him crossing the line just in front of the leaders there, coming across the stripe. So the Joe Gibbs team's not fully recovered from the embarrassment they had at Sonoma, although Martin Truex seemed to be performing much better than he had before, getting the top 10 run at the same time. Joey Hand was very pleased to see him staying around the top 10, at least in the first stage. Once again, like Sears Point, it seemed like strategy was kind of an issue that kept him further back in the lineup, ultimately finishing in the 21st position between Ty Dillon and Harrison Burton. Chase Briscoe back in the 14th spot. After a good qualifying run, he ends up behind Truex, who got 13th. A lot of the other usual suspects in the mix there. Ryan Blaney winning the second stage, but getting up there. But yeah, Joey Hand getting the second place run in stage 2. That was exciting to see after Cody Ware getting the 10th place finish in one of the stages at Sears Point. Certainly any positive momentum for the Rick Ware effort, given that, some of these teams, again, they got to capitalize wherever they can. You usually think of super speedways being the only place that they can, but these road courses, and especially the increasing number of road courses we've had, has kind of opened that up. Kudos to Dale Jr. for really mentioning that, again, a lot of these drivers that are from other road course disciplines are really looking at these Cup cars now because they've adopted a lot of the technology from IMSA and so forth, and seeing drivers like Joey Hand up there definitely turns things on its head from when it used to be that drivers that were regulars in the Cup Series didn't really want to tackle these tracks, or maybe the team owners didn't want these drivers running. Now it's a situation where I guess it's like a buyer's market now, and these guys really want to get in there. I know we talked with Dave Smith last year, who actually I believe he made his Xfinity debut at Watkins Glen later that season, but he was looking to kind of get one of these races in the next-gen car this year. So far, unfortunately, it hasn't happened. I don't know if something fell through at Sears Point when they just had the 36 chartered guys out there. But again, something else to kind of look forward to. I don't think we're going to see too many more runs with Boris Said or Ron Fellows as they're kind of scaling back in their career. But perhaps the next generation of these drivers, again, Joey Hand being another perfect example here of competitors back in the mix. So I'm glad they're able to distinguish themselves at the same time. Several other drivers having more struggles. We talk about Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin as well. More issues on pit road. 17th place finish. Further back in the lineup for him. It seemed like he was running a lot worse than that given the issues he was having. Christopher Bell with some problems on pit road, finishing in the 18th spot there. But many other drivers back in the order there too. Gotta say, I'm having a little bit of difficulty digesting this particular race because it seemed like it was very difficult. I think that this race is probably one of the hardest ones to cover. Even if you are a TV network or something like that, I think that if you have the track is so large and it's so easy to miss things. And as critical as I am of that aspect at most tracks, I think this is one of the ones where it's a bit of a challenge. I thought NBC was doing kind of an okay job of actually kind of catching up on things when somebody was running off course or something like that. I think they got a little overly excited in a lot of those cases where you kind of get back to that situation where you have the commentators shouting over the top of each other. That's still very much a problem from the announcers that we have here. We also saw that there's a little bit of a problem where the announcers don't seem to really listen to each other, where Steve Letarte, as I tweeted earlier, goes through this whole rigmarole describing about why these other drivers are at the back of the field. And then Rick Allen just kind of casually asks, like, is it surprising, Steve, to see some of these drivers back there? And I was surprised Steve would be like, did you not hear what I just said at this point? I know it used to be like this. It's not just only been an NBC problem. Fox used to have this problem too, especially between like somebody like Darrell Waltrip or Larry McReynolds, not quite understanding what Mike Joy would say and sometimes repeating each other or just coming in there and saying it that way. But it's it's still just, I think again, NBC still has like this too many cooks in the kitchen approach where they all want to be the play-by-play guy. And we still saw this today, even with a race that had very, much less traditional action, that you kind of had to really pick things out. That still seemed like it was a problem. I really do sense that Jeff Burton and Dale Jr. and Steve Letarte and to a lesser extent Rick Allen are all kind of at the same volume level. Rick Allen a little bit less so. And again, that's where I kind of get that feeling where he doesn't have that firm presence there in the booth, and that he kind of gets big-footed by everybody else, and then everybody's kind of trading it off there. Hopefully that improves the rest of this year, but I'm not sure it's going to, given the fact that NBC is now stuck with this lineup for as long as they have. Frankly, I think Dale Jarrett and Brad Daugherty, their additional role on pit road, I think they do some decent analysis from there. You could probably do a good enough play-by-play with just two guys in the booth there. The clip was played earlier this week of Dale Jarrett being part of the booth with Dave Burns during Jeremy Clement's first win at Road America. And again, given the logistical challenges of the track and how many things were going on, the two of them seem to cover the action plenty there. So, I don't know if NBC is going to work that out. I'm really kind of, ambivalent about this Atlanta race next week, because that was the race that, really highlighted a lot of the problems with the Fox side of the broadcast, especially in the Xfinity side with Adam Alexander. I don't know if the NBC booth is going to be able to cover this a lot better, but that'll be something else that we'll kind of look at there too. But the other thing that was certainly not covered was any of the issues at the back of the pack. Now, I know that that's not the reason that everybody watches a race, but we didn't get any mention of what was happening with Corey LaJoie, no mention of what was happening with Loris Hezemans, any of these other drivers at the back of the pack. We saw Bubba Wallace go into the runoff. We saw then Austin Dillon at the very end of the race go into the runoff, so at least they were showing that. But, again, if you had a long green flag run where there's not a lot happening, why wouldn't you have somebody in the garage area poking around and doing that? Luckily for our case here, we had William over there, and already from the stuff that he sent me by email during the race, I think he did some fantastic coverage there from that. So I look forward to putting that in the article tonight and getting that up for you guys, because I think it'll be a good view from there. This Road America track is Williams' home track there, and I know he probably knows that place as well as I know Sears Point's there. So kudos to him for that. Also got an article from him for the IndyCar race this morning in Mid-Ohio. I myself didn't watch it, but I understand from a lot of the tweets that I saw this morning here that it sounded like it was pretty action-packed there as well. So look forward to some more content on that side there too. But yeah, congratulations to Tyler Reddick. I mean, I really have to say I'm very pleased with what's been going on with him. Long time coming. They played plenty of the replays of all those close calls he had. If you were to tell me even last week that his first Cup Series win was going to be at a road course, never mind one where he had to literally rip it from Chase Elliott's hands under a long green flag stretch, I would have absolutely not believed you. I thought for sure McDowell was going to be one of the guys that was going to be really aggressive in this race and be able to be up there. And while he had his good signs, I think, especially in the first part of the race here, the long run speed was definitely between those two cars. The two best cars were definitely going at it. And while it may not be, a four-wide super speedway battle for position, I thought that part of the race, at least itself, was very exciting. And I know Tyler's jacked up, and good for him. Good for him and the Childress group in general. I know Austin Dillon's kind of been knocking on the door some decent runs earlier this year. It seems like he's still kind of getting his feet back under him, certainly with the problems he had in today's race were another good indication of that. But congratulations again to Reddick. I think he's one of the more popular drivers in the garage area. Maybe he doesn't get as much press attention. I remember back at Fontana earlier this year when he had that race, seemed like he had it just in his back pocket and he was going to get it. Then he had the flat tire. He got sideswiped by Byron. And he was very calm about it. He was just hanging out with some friends afterwards and just like, well, it slipped through. But it was just another indication of just how close he'd come and managed to, keep it in perspective. Because I know certainly drivers, you think of like Casey Kane or Harry Gant, drivers that had to get a lot of runner-up finishes before they broke through with their first victory. This being another, representative of that. Kudos to him there, because I know that different drivers handle that pressure differently. Sometimes you don't see a lot of those struggles as much, but certainly kudos to him for pulling that off. So I think that was very impressive at the same time there too. So hopefully we'll have some more information on that too. 5 different last place finishers, I guess we're up to now, which is on par with 2001. With 2001, the thing is that took the entire length of the season. The first time winner of the year, of course, was Michael Waltrip in that tragic 500 that started the year. And the last one was Robbie Gordon, and the season had just expanded to 36 races at that time. The New Hampshire race that had been postponed because of the 9/11 attacks in November. The race was postponed to November from September. Robbie Gordon won that one. So it took the entire length of that season to get 16 different winners. We're up to 13 at this point, including all those 5 first-time winners this year. That's extraordinary. And we've talked about it many times already with the different drivers that we've had. And then you look at the caliber of drivers that still haven't reached victory lane. We haven't had Harvick win. We haven't had Ryan Blaney win. Just Martin Truex, other drivers that you would expect to be in there. And I don't see a lot of those drivers going winless in the regular season, although anything's certainly possible. I mean, any one of these drivers that have won now, I know Daniel Suarez, had a look in his eye after he won Sears Point that he's like, once you win your first one, you're unstoppable. And he looked very good today, at least getting her solid run right there, matched with his teammate there. And he could very much be a factor down the stretch. We haven't seen somebody really pull away that much. Chase Elliott has certainly looked good, and Chastain and these others, but there hasn't been one driver that has actually utterly dominated this season. Next week in Atlanta is going to be a bit of a crapshoot. It's going to be hard to really determine, who could get up there. Ross Chastain was very good in the spring race before he had that tire issue that put him in the wall. If he doesn't have that happen, he could very easily be, the driver with the most wins, if not anybody else. I think it's something else to kind of look forward to. I still think that 16 winners is very much a realistic option during the first 26 races, which I never really would have thought before. We're so used to these older cars where somebody just figures it out and rattles off 5 or 6 wins. Sears Point itself has been a time where usually a driver really figures things out. But by that point, you already have multiple drivers with 3 wins. This has definitely not been that kind of year. So again, maybe not the most exciting race for, in a lot of traditional metrics. I'll be interested to see how it looks on Jeff Gluck's poll this week. I imagine it'll probably more like, middle tier. But again, I thought a decent, one-on-one battle. At the end of the day, a race can be between just 2 cars out there. And I think we had, something like that. So yeah, that'll be a different one. Was it 19 different winners, Charles? Okay. I thought it was 16. I thought it was 16 just the regular full season. But yeah, see, even more. That would be a larger metric there too. But again, tremendous measures from one season or another. 19 winners in the first 26 races. I think that would be a bit harder to reach. I don't know. We'll find out what happens on that end there too. So let's see. Let me get on here. I want to get into the Xfinity race here too, because I'm definitely seeing already some of the comments here in the super chat on that one as well. Let's get into that. But first last place run for the number 27 car since Rick Ware had fielded it with J.J. Yaley and Greg Alding and a few other drivers during the pandemic-affected season back in 2020. I believe Texas, the one with the mist that happened over the track, was the last time the 27 finished last in that one, with the Fat Boy Ice Cream car dropping out before the race was postponed. And then I believe the Daytona race, or one of the other earlier ones that year, was the last time there was an issue with a fuel pump in the Cup Series too that had caused the last place finish. So we had a different scenario there at the same time. Going back to the Xfinity Series race. Again, the article already posted on this. We'll talk about the last place battle first. Will Rogers with his first last place finish. He very nearly was last at Watkins Glen last year before the results were shaken up a bit in post-race inspection. Rogers this time driving for Motorsports Business Management with Carl Long, finishing in the 38th position there with suspension issues. Although it sounded like there were many more issues besides that that were dropping him out into the 38th position. Seemed like Jesse Iwuji was going to be at the back of the field. From the notes that William provided at the time there, I was kind of tracking this race more remotely, so we had kind of fewer updates that I was doing on the Twitter side. But big thanks to William for filling in the gap on that, because I thought he did a great write-up on that, and I was able to add the statistics on that side and get that one up the other day. But Rogers and the number 13 team being your last place finishers on that. Ty Dillon with a cracked header finishing in the 37th spot. We got a shot of that car being lifted on the lift gate there. The hauler at the end of the race, Joe Graff Jr., Brett Moffitt, and Brandon Brown rounding out the bottom five. And this certainly brings us to the biggest controversy, I would say, certainly from the NASCAR portion of the weekend. And that was certainly the accident between Noah Gragson and the Sage Karam that triggered the massive pileup under one of the bridges there. Just a ridiculous set of circumstances there. It seemed like there were definitely, a lot of the replays certainly showed that Sage Karam was kind of leaning into Gragson on a couple of those corners. It was just some hard racing. At some point, they were kind of sliding off in the grass. They could just keep racing from that point and just keep fighting for that position. But Gragson definitely seemed to have a aggressive move that he threw on the 45, put him in the wall. Already an unfortunate situation for Alpha Prime Racing, which had both of its cars very much in contention for top 15 runs there. But then you end up having this massive pileup with some absolutely brutal hits out there. Not just Brandon Brown's wreck, which was very scary when he got into the 48 of Tyler Reddick, but also Landon Castle's car catching air as well as the pileup really intensified at that point. A scary situation. Apparently, it was very similar to what happened to Corey LaJoie in the Ryan Newman accident at Daytona. The belts had cinched down on Brandon Brown when the impact happened, and he had to catch his breath once he got out of the car, although it was a scary moment, certainly from the visuals of it, when he climbed back out of the car. And kudos again to Myatt Snyder for checking on him as well. We've seen already a couple examples of that already. I understand in the Formula One world, there was a pretty scary close call there at Silverstone there, where George Russell checked in on the driver that was involved in that accident as well. Again, in both cases, apparently drivers are okay, so that's certainly good news on that end. But on the Xfinity Series side, yeah, just an absolutely ridiculous pileup. Didn't need to happen. We could have just had a continuing great race between Karam and Gragson. But unfortunately, yeah, I mean, Gregson's just in that Ernie Irvan position where I guess he's just a driver that's going to be involved in a lot of these incidents. And is not making a whole lot of friends out of there in the garage area, which is unfortunate because he does have a tremendous amount of talent. I still think that he's handling it the right way in terms of his progression into the Cup Series by actually running Cup races instead of the alternative where you have Cup guys getting into the lower tiers. But again, I don't believe that excuses what was a pretty blatant incident that ultimately that involved him too at the same time. You always think back to that clip at Kansas in 2012, I guess it was, where Landon Castle himself was criticizing Danica Patrick for trying to take him out and then ended up taking herself out in the process. A ridiculous wreck. I don't blame Tommy Joe Martins at all for being upset about that. And Sage Karam being upset at the same time too. I think that a lot of words were thrown around on that, and understandably so. It was a scary incident on a narrow part of a track that doesn't have safer barriers or tires everywhere. You have these concrete barriers in those parts of the track. Is it practical for a track of this length that you can put safer barriers around the entire thing? Well, hopefully one day it would be great too, but perhaps it just hasn't been. I'm not exactly sure what NASCAR's view of that is. It would be interesting to see because even on the main straightaway, you don't really have safer barriers in that section either. It's again mostly tire barriers and concrete barriers around most of that speedway there too. But of course, there's the other issue on top of all of this, where, we had that rumor coming into this event about, is this track going to be even on the schedule next year, versus the plans about perhaps doing a street race in Chicago or whatever other venue that is. I don't know how true that rumor is. I think that NASCAR is perhaps getting a little ahead of themselves about the way this car handles a bit closer to sports cars, and knowing that you've had some sports car races on street courses there. I'm not sure if that's the direction they really want to go. I don't know if it's going to have like great racing in that sense. But I think we had enough of decent racing throughout this pack. I don't know how much of it we actually saw between these two broadcasts. But I think Road America is a decent track. I think it has a great fan base out there. I kind of like the picnic atmosphere that the track seems to have. I think that fits on a July 4th weekend. I know that's the other part of this whole controversy is, of course, a lot of people, Daytona was trending pretty high on Twitter, and it seemed like, it was for various reasons, but I'm sure one reason was a lot of discussion about having the Firecracker 400 this weekend. The Firecracker was great, but especially as a night race, one of the big problems, of course, is that you really had all those rain delays. And of course, at a road course, even at Road America, you're not going to have that same issue. If you do have some summer weather like that roll through, you can run rain tires on these road courses, which I'm sure is one of the reasons they ultimately put it on this weekend. Back in the day, you used to have the Firecracker 400 like earlier in the morning. It used to be a morning race, where you'd have to even get up pretty early here on the West Coast here to watch it, so that the race would be over with before it got really hot outside in the afternoon, and everybody could go to the beach in the afternoon, and you could just have a full day that way. But when they changed it to a night race, and as exciting as it was to put the lights on Daytona and have a super speedway that you can run at night, much like you could run at Charlotte earlier, you had a situation where it just wasn't. I think that's when the rain delays became much more of an issue. Because, of course, when you have a rain delay at night, you don't have the sun to help dry off the track. You don't have as wide of a window. I mean, you're going to run the race at 3 in the morning, kind of like you had the Southern 500 a couple of years ago. Generally, you're not going to want to do that. You're going to end up probably pushing it to the next day. And so, unfortunately, and of course, this is not to say the 500 has not had its share of rain delays. Certainly, in recent years, that's been a big problem. It seems like it's almost a yearly tradition. The myth of Bill France weather, I think, has been fully dismissed by the recent stretch of Daytona 500s there too. This is something I'm sure NASCAR is still thinking about as they reorganize things in their schedule for next year and the years beyond. Again, I think Road America is a decent track. Again, it produces a different kind of racing. We've seen both ends of it between the Xfinity race and the Cup race here. You can have a race where field is really, stretched out and it's a matter of strategy, or you can have one where it's several restarts and you have a lot of chaos happening, like we saw in the Xfinity Series race. We've kind of gone to field there from the Noah Gragson situation. But yeah, I do side with the prevailing thought there with Gragson that that was a bit of an overreaction there on the driver of the 9. It's unfortunate that it played out that way. I think it would have been much better if they were able to continue that race through the rest of the event. But tempers flare in these races sometimes. Kyle Busch was very transparent, I feel, about that when he mentioned that in his movie earlier this week, especially when he was talking about the Ron Hornaday situation. Again, does that, just because it's something that you understand in the aftermath, does that mean that was the right call? Well, no, not really at that point. So Gragson ends up with the 8th place finish, but unfortunately Sage Karam ends up with a destroyed car and a 31st place finish in that one, well back in the running order. Another kind of scary hit that we had there too, Chris Dyson's accident there, entering one of the corners there. It seemed like he got turned into the wall that I believe it was Josh Berry or Sam Mayer. I think it was Sam Mayer actually hit in the 2021 running there, put him into the fence. That was a bit of a freaky accident there. Good to see him climb out of that car. Just the second start for Chris Dyson, who's very much a standout in the Trans Am series there, finishing in 28th spot there in the running order. Cole Custer, again, not a big fan of the Cup guys being the lower series. This was another race that was dominated by them for no particular reason, really. Even though Ty Gibbs pulled off the win, and yes, that was a decent battle for the victory at the end, and yes, Ty Gibbs is still a full-time Xfinity guy, so it's good that you have a driver that's capable of doing it. I think that just points to even less of a reason that Kyle Larson or Cole Custer or these other drivers should be in there. Good to see Custer's okay after the accident he had there, but up to that point, he was going to be a top five driver in this race easily. But a lot of these other competitors that are working their way up there would have been great if they've been featured more. Andy Lally had two spins at least, got the fender torn off in that big wreck there. Still ends up in a 14th place finish there. Josh Bilicki in 13th, almost got his career best finish there. And the other Alpha Prime entry, the flagship number 44, Preston Pardis, very nearly getting a top 10 there, finishing the 11th spot right behind Ryan Sieg. Overcoming, I believe he had some issues on pit road where drivers were having trouble kind of getting around him there. Good to see him get a good finish out there. The Miata driver is certainly one to watch when you get to these road courses, and especially Road America there. I think there were a lot of drivers that, that had some positive runs, drivers that were, more competitive than you would expect. But it's unfortunate that you got to throw these cup guys in there. And again, I think, as not, I know, and I sensed there was a little bit of this bias, even in the broadcast as well. Yes, of course, the number 17 that Larson was driving has significant, emotional attachment for the Hendrick Motorsports team, being, of course, a number that Ricky Hendrick ran and, in his career, at least I believe in the truck series there when he was working his way up the ranks. So seeing that number out there again in any format, I know is something on that. But again, use that to develop other young talent like Ricky. Put somebody in there. If you have to run an Xfinity Series car, don't put Kyle Larson in it. And, don't tell me it's about a sponsor because you put HendrickCars.com on the car. So it's definitely not something, I mean, again, that what I like that's almost refreshing about this is that ever since Kyle Busch has scaled back on the Xfinity Series, all the BS explanations for why we need Cup guys in the Xfinity Series have all kind of suddenly just kind of gone away. It's like, oh no, we need to have Cup guys in there because otherwise these sponsors won't sign with other guys. Well, that's not true. It's like, oh well, at least they're running for like other teams, or something like that. It's absurd. It's a Hendrick car with a the defending series champion driving it at a road course where he very easily could have won last year, battling Chase Elliott. And you're just putting him out there. I mean, it's, and again, it's like, and then treating it like it's unexpected. It was like, oh my goodness, he won both stages. It's like, well, yeah, that should be fully expected. It's even a former, Hendrick chassis that they were running that they put an Xfinity body on. It's one of the cars that Larson himself already drove last year. It's literally a Cup car in every sense, except for the fact that, of course, you got the next gen car this year. But you run the exact same car just under different technical restrictions. It's just ridiculous. So it's going to be something that I'll just keep hammering every week. If you're new to the show here, it's definitely something that's been something that's always kind of grated at me. And I don't care if the Xfinity Series regulars like having him in there and like getting their butts whooped by him as he leads 31 of 48 laps. Is it really helpful? I mean, is teaching drivers to lose to a Cup driver really that helpful? I mean, if they want to lose to a Cup driver, fill one of those open spots in a Cup Series field and take your shot at it. Again, it's one of the things, it's one of the aspects of Noah Gragson's career that I'm the least critical of, is his ambitions to run the Cup Series and actually going through with it and getting those opportunities with multiple different teams, even to the benefit of a team like Beard Motorsports that doesn't get a whole lot of attention. I think that's exactly the way to go about it. If you want to go against Cup guys, the opportunity is right there. And this leads us to another debate from this week. One thing that I thought was really entertaining was this discussion between Dale Jr. and Denny Hamlin. I believe it was on Friday, asking about the issue of charters. And it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. JR Motorsports certainly wants to get into the Cup Series, and they certainly have the pedigree to get there. They've been in the Xfinity Series for years. They've developed a lot of talent. They've even redeveloped talent in the cases of Justin Allgaier, who's really found a place for himself in the Xfinity Series. And despite his 12th place run in this past race, he usually runs much better than that, which is certainly much better than he had in his first shot in the Cup Series with H. Scott Motorsports. What was very entertaining to me was the sudden realization. It's like, well, wait a minute, we don't have enough charters. We have 36 charters. A lot of these teams are holding them. And they all get a share of the purse. And on the one side, you have Denny Hamlin, who had to buy his way in, getting, to buy in the charters. And this isn't an exaggeration. He had to get those charters to get into the sport there, getting the one from Starcom Racing to expand to 2 cars. And then at the same time, talking about the issue of, well, what if we get 37 charters or 38? Is there a process for this where someone is just merely given one? And Denny Hamlin raised the point saying, well, okay, well, what about the fact that I had to pay millions of dollars to buy mine? It's like, yeah, you did. Well, this was one of the many things that I was concerned about at the start of the charter system initially, because basically what happened is these teams awarded themselves this asset merely because they had fielded full-time cars for 3 consecutive years before, which, by the way, didn't include the Wood brothers. There was no, if this was to say that this was supposed to be something that rewarded longtime investors in the sport, you certainly can't say that at one blush and then point out the fact that they didn't get one just because they scaled to part-time during that arbitrary 3-year span. You create that situation. And then, you're going to have, so I mean, who's to say you can't just give another team a charter now? Say, okay, well, look, have a process where somebody just earns one. Maybe if you have a full-time Xfinity program, maybe not for 3 years, maybe for 5 years, or maybe if you've won an Xfinity Series championship or something like that. Maybe now you have maybe now you have 37 charters that are out there, or 38. We have a bit of a window now. They've created a situation where you have we've had 43 car fields, that we have tracks that have 43 pit stalls. Who's to say you can't just award a driver that? Who's to say that that's any different than this whole process that started things from the very beginning, where drivers just, these teams awarded themselves this asset? I mean, was there ever going to be a situation where Hendrick Motorsports is not going to be able to qualify for a race? Very unlikely. Is there going to be a situation where Joe Gibbs Racing isn't, but they hold charters? It's not meant to just be something for fringe teams out there. So I pointed this out in the Twitter discussion there, and it got a little bit of traffic. I wasn't, I was a little surprised it didn't encourage more of a discussion on it. But I really think that, again, if you have to have the charter system, and I still insist that you don't, I think the fact that you have other teams that want to get in here, and it already costs a lot to buy the equipment and hire the drivers and hire the pit crews and do all that other stuff. There's already enough obstacles to get in the Cup Series to begin with. Why you have to have this other arbitrary amount where the charters aren't, the market for charters isn't controlled by NASCAR at all. It's entirely supply and demand. And if you have one available and you have 5 people going for it, it's going to be worth a lot more than you having 3 charters available and nobody can afford to get into the sport. That's just the way it's set up. There's, the other thing that that's always bothered me with this charter system is that because of that, it has to be a system that's dependent on failure, that a new team can only come in if an old team wants to come out. And this is only a situation. This is not to say that teams haven't left the sport before. Of course, we don't have traditional petty enterprises anymore because there weren't any safeguards in place. We don't have Budmore Engineering. We don't have these other programs. But teams come and go all the time. I'm sure back in the 1950s, Carl Kiekhafer's team was probably thought like, oh my gosh, these guys are going to be here forever. They got like all the top drivers. They run however many cars out there. And then pretty soon, within a couple of years, they're gone. And then the entire face of the sport changes. It's always been kind of the Wild West in terms of which teams are able to stay in there. And they got to do whatever they can. There's not going to be any guarantees out there. Again, it's so instead of having a situation where you're not only, you're already going to have that kind of unpredictability, but where you're going to create a different situation where you need to have somebody fall out in order to get JR Motorsports into the Cup Series, or say RSS Racing is looking into it, or some other team like that, if they ever have ambitions of getting into the Cup Series. We've seen BJ McLeod enter his own car, even separate from the Team Live Fast effort when he got Matt Mills into the show. Who's to say any of these teams shouldn't have that opportunity as well? Why isn't there something that treats it as a positive reward? That's the thing I think that needs to be looked at. Why isn't a charter something that you can earn? Why is it something that you only merely need to pay for? I think that there should be some kind of reward system there where, okay, you have a process where drivers can work their way up the rankings. Should there be a process where teams can work their way up the rankings? I think there probably could be. And, I would love it if we had a lot of open teams out there and starting these races. But if we're creating a situation now where we have 36 cars every week because you can't get any open teams out there, then that really needs to be, needs to be looked at it again. And now again, I would caution this because I would hate to have the opening for open teams completely eliminated. Let's say you still have those 4 open spots, but it brings it up to 43 cars, and maybe you get 39 cars that are chartered or something. I guess the problem is you're going to have a ceiling at some point that you can't just say like, okay, you get a charter and you get a charter, you get a charter, and then suddenly what a charter means isn't meaning, it doesn't mean a guaranteed spot in all 36 races because you're only going to be able to have so many cars in the field. There's that. But again, that's, at least start kind of exploring some options there. And if it ends up creating a situation where the whole thing just collapses, I'm okay with that too. Because frankly, I mean, if it creates a situation where, maybe you have a whole lot of teams that are able to earn charters, and then you have more charters than you have even guaranteed starting spots. Well, I don't know. I would not be sad to see the whole charter system just implode at that point either, because racing is never about guarantees. It's never a guarantee. A team is not entitled to a starting spot. I didn't like the top 35 rule. I didn't like a lot of those other ones. I think that if a team is good enough and they're able to run a business well enough, I don't believe that a race team is too big to fail. And the sport has been able to operate consistently over the years in lean times and good times, based on those business models. So, it's very possible that the situation is that they can't improve it any more than they have. But it's just disappointing that there still is that barrier where you can't get more cup teams in there, that they can't get up there. You create this artificial log jam, because it's disappointing, because the Xfinity series and the Truck series seem like they're still very much capable of actually getting more organizations out there. And as much as hurtful as it is for these teams to miss the show, I know I was reading a Facebook post earlier today from some of the folks there at the Mike Harmon racing team, that they literally, in their words, have their back against the wall here after these multiple DNQs there for just running the one car. I mean, keep in mind, just the last couple of years, they're running 2 cars and actually every once in a while getting some decent runs. Now they're really trying to scrape together to get one car going. That is an unfortunate reality of the sport. But it's one that, that's got to be seen and understood and should be taken into account with the business model and where it goes in the future. So, yeah, that's definitely another thing to really look at too. Anyway, that's enough of a rant on that too, but I think that was a different one to kind of look at the same time. Let me catch up on these super chats here too. Thank you so much for the super chats on this one. I think this will be a good follow-up here as well. Alex Severos, thank you for yours here. What Gregson did is wrong, but I seen Sage in IndyCar from his rookie year. He loves to be very aggressive, which rubs people the wrong way. He needs to also look in the mirror. Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a very fair point. Sage Karam has been very aggressive in IndyCar racing, and he's been aggressive in his Cup races. I remember back at Phoenix last year, they were saying that Gregson, Sage Karam rather, wasn't making many friends out there with a lot of the incidents that he was being involved in during that race. So again, I think you have 2 aggressive drivers just butt heads. You got a unstoppable force and an immovable object, and then you have a different incident there. So, is it inevitable though? I think again, it would be great to see like these 2 drivers be able to keep racing and keep the race interesting. I guess maybe it's going to reach a breaking point. Was Gregson going, was Karam going to wreck Gregson? Hard to say. I mean, he was racing him very hard. I don't want to make it seem like Karam, didn't have any role in what happened there for sure. But I do think Gregson I think it was a bit over the top to dump him. I mean, especially when you're not going for the lead, especially when it's not a series regular out there. This is where I kind of left this hanging earlier about the way the broadcast kind of covered that. There were 2 aspects of it that I thought were a little bit distasteful, quite honestly, from a couple different members of the booth. The first on Rick Allen's side, was when Sage Karam was interviewed, and Karam had been involved in the accident and was kind of saying like, well, he's a driver that doesn't usually run in the series that often. And when he brought that up, he almost kind of seemed to bring that up as his opinion on the way Gragson was racing him, or his ability to race the series regulars hard, should have been curtailed a bit because he wasn't a full time driver. I thought that was a little bit off, and it almost seemed like maybe Karam should have understood that Gragson drives more aggressively, or Gragson should have more latitude to race more aggressively because he's a full time driver. I remember when he said he was kind of talking about that in that aspect, and it came up again around the interview with Karam. I thought that was a little strange because it's like, well, wait a minute, I think all these drivers should be able to throw elbows and be able to race each other as they can. I don't believe that just because a person is a Cup series, person is a series regular, much less a championship contender. I don't think that it's such a situation where they're not allowed to be raced hard. I think that's what it felt to me was, it's like Karam should have understood that Gragson was a particularly aggressive driver, which I could agree with to an extent, but should he have expected to be dumped if he's just racing him a little bit? Well, no, I think that's ridiculous. I don't think that regulars should get that much more latitude there. The other thing I thought was a little bit off about that was when the big wreck happened and you saw that there were two very serious impacts, certainly again the Landon Castle aspect and the Brandon Brown part of it. When the camera then switched over to Josh Bilicki pushing the Sargento cheese sign and just laughing about it, and Steve Letarte in the booth just being like, well, I don't know if Sargento counted on getting that much exposure in the race. It's like, we don't even know if everybody in the wreck is okay here, folks. Like calm down a little bit. Let's not go to the humorous side of it so quickly here. I will give Steve Letarte credit though, because he did mention that later in the broadcast, and I thought he actually addressed it quite well. Saying that, look, I'm in the booth. I'm used to seeing a lot of these accidents happen and drivers just hopping out of it and being okay. I think the Brandon Brown accident, when he saw Brown get out of the car, he kind of was expressing that at that point. So I'm less critical of him. I thought he did a very good job actually in addressing that. I think if anything in that particular incident, I think it was much more of an issue again on the director's side of it. Showing this car with the cheese sign and how much attention was getting focused on that. It's like, whoa, hang on, let's go back to this accident scene here and see who was involved and all that. It wasn't even clear at that point who was involved in the accident really, because the smoke was still up there and it was just starting to clear. You think at that point all cameras would be on that zone and see who was involved and pick it out and see if it was any of the series regulars or any of the championship contenders, and something that the booth could focus on that way. So those were a couple of things. I mean, not big issues, but issues that just kind of hit a little bit wrong. But again, I want to applaud Steve Letarte for addressing it in the broadcast. I wish Rick Allen would have with his, because I thought he came off a little bit, I don't know, I don't want to say insensitive, because I think that's a little exaggerated, but just a little indifferent to kind of what was going on with the Noah Gragson and Sage Karam situation. I think that we had, again, two aggressive drivers, but I think they were kind of playing sides a little bit there, and that was a little unfortunate, especially if they're going to be in the booth and addressing what's happening from one race to the next. I get that there's not as much a history with Karam in the Xfinity series versus Gragson, but again, they're on equal terms as competitors. And again, Karam, what's to say for Karam's situation there, where he's trying to get Alpha Prime Racing a good run, and they were getting a good run, just like Bilicki was able to in his situation too. But I take your point, Alex, there as well, that again, Sage Karam has been an aggressive driver himself, and I think any analysis of the wreck is going to be something that people are going to look at that much closer there too. Michael Jensen, thank you for your super chat as well. Congrats to Reddick, well deserved finally. Question, when there are guys like Hezemans, Tilley, or etc. in the field, do you have pre-done info for last car, since they most likely will finish last? That's a good question. The short answer to that is yes. What I do, that's the big way that I prepare for, maybe unexpected drivers finishing in last place. is the entry list storylines article. If you look at some of my older articles, some of them became kind of long and a little bit distracted from the last place battle because I was kind of describing all the changes on the entry list from one week to the next. And that became kind of challenging because my research for a lot of those drivers and teams would start very late. It would start like even during the race. By doing the entry list storylines articles, those allow me to kind of, since I post those usually the Thursday before the race, the research I do from one driver or team change to the next is it allows me to kind of understand who these drivers are and who to watch for. Because like you said, yeah, these are drivers that very likely could finish last. Kyle Tilley I believe he was part of the last place battle in the race last year, driving for the Team Live Fast effort. But yeah, I think that's always the big thing, and that's something I've thought about having one of our other maybe our staff writers do the entry list storylines thing because it does take a bit of time, and I think it's one of the reasons that my video production is a lot. It takes as long as it has. But I really enjoy I may still do that in the future, but I really enjoy doing the entry list articles now because it mentally prepares me for each weekend and who to look for and say, it's like, oh, like when they had that gym teacher that was driving the 38 car at Portland. I thought that was a great story, and it was good to be able to follow up on that. If a driver is local to the area, a lot of times those drivers are brought into the mix. And then, of course, you have situations where it's a guy like Brad Perez that's getting in there, and then we get the sponsorship even on the truck. Yeah, that's the big way I prepare for it. So a lot of the articles that you see posted over the weekend, they start really with the entry list storyline. And then, of course, if it ends up being a bigger name driver, or a series regular or a championship contender, it's a bit easier to get that information because those drivers are focused on a bit more. So yeah, I think that's another one to look at. But good question, Michael. Thank you for bringing that up. Beast of Metal, thank you for your super chat as well. My goodness. On the one hand, any new winner is cool, but since it's Reddick and with his Xfinity starts, I have a springboard to ask this. Am I the only one who is less excited when a Cup regular tearing up the lower tours wins a Cup race? Again, that's a very good question too. And I certainly understand where you're coming from because I know I've been outspoken on Tyler Reddick's role at Big Machine Racing where he and Austin Dillon are kind of shoehorned into it. I think that does affect it a little bit. And I think in Reddick's case, especially again, being in that Harry Gant, Casey Kane situation where he could have very easily been a race winner last season or, earlier this year, it almost feels like he's a driver that's already won in the Cup Series. And maybe, those Xfinity runs would seem even less excusable because, okay, here's a guy that now he's arrived. He's a Cup Series race winner. He was certainly capable of winning races, even going back to 2020, I would say. I try to remember, well, was it 2020? Well, I guess 2020 was when Hemrick was in the car, so I guess it wouldn't be then. But 2021, or when his rookie season, or wasn't that, or am I getting that backwards? Was it 2019? It was with okay, now I gotta get that. They should have really changed the way the number looked when they had Hemrick in the car versus that, because I think it was Hemrick in 2018 that was at the Roval and he had the good run, but that was a one-off. And then 2019, I think, was when they had the gold cars, him and Austin Dillon, and they brought the 8 car back. And then 2020 was Reddick getting there. I try to do this without looking online here. So again, just like with the different winners in 2001 earlier, thank you for catching that as well. I try to do this from memory if I can, because it comes off smoother. But correct me if I'm wrong on that. I think that seems to be the chronology, if I remember it correctly. The 2020 was when you had Reddick in the 8 car. Because, 2021 was just last year. That was already I think that was his second season, I think. Because, that would be it. But regardless, back to his earlier career, back to when he was driving the 31 car at Kansas, and he had a top 10 run there. He showed that he was a driver. Reddick was a driver that was capable of being, a Cup Series guy. Okay, Reddick succeeded him in 2020. That makes sense. So, so when you had Reddick in the car, he showed promise very early on. And I think that, to me, I definitely understand where you're coming from, Beast of Metal, because when you have a driver that seems capable of winning Cup races, I think it's very easy to mentally think of that driver as already a Cup Series winner. You could probably look at, I think the two ways you have to look at it is Reddick versus maybe somebody like Daniel Suarez. And I don't mean to pick on Suarez, but he was certainly in a position where when he was driving for Joe Gibbs Racing, when he was driving for Stuart Haas Racing, and certainly when he ended up kicked back over to the Gaunt brothers, he wasn't really a driver that seemed to be a consistent contender for wins. He seemed like, it's like, oh boy, he's kind of, maybe he was rushed up there a bit too soon. Certainly there was the Carl Edwards situation. He had kind of a different situation. But it was definitely a situation where he wasn't a driver that you would say, oh man, it feels like he's already won 2 or 3 races, because it really didn't feel that way, even where he was already an Xfinity Series champion, which, not to make little of that. But with Reddick, right from the start, he was having much better runs than Suarez did at that phase of his career. Got some stability with the Childress team. He and Austin Dillon being 1-2 at that Texas race that one time, having that really strong runs at tracks where he can run the high line, especially like Homestead and Fontana. He always seemed to be a factor in those. Yeah, I'm with you. I probably felt like he had already won, and not just won once, but maybe won 2 or 3 races, and then you have to kind of remind yourself that he hadn't. Now, of course, Suarez coming into this season, he's been much closer to talking about Reddick and saying, now he's a guy that he should have won the Bristol Dirt race last year. He had some good runs earlier this year, almost winning Fontana. He was almost on equal terms with Reddick this year. And so seeing, Reddick in a lower division race would feel like seeing Suarez in a lower division race. So it kind of changes. I think in terms of creating like a rule change, I know that you're not talking about a rule change here in this sense, but in terms of what feels right in terms of having a guy in a lower division event, I think if a person is capable of winning a cup race, hopefully sportsmanship would indicate it's like, well, maybe I should focus just a little bit more on the Cup Series side here, especially with this new car and everything, and try to get that first win. And then once we do that, kind of keep that ball rolling there. I do have half an article on a follow-up on my banning the Cup drivers from the Xfinity Series, one of my latest article on the subject. And I've been looking to kind of find a way to kind of finish that up. It's another plate I have spinning in the air here that I'm still working on, just trying to figure out when I'm going to finish that one off. Yeah, I think that that's something to kind of look at. I get where that would feel like it's not cool where he's running the Xfinity races, and especially where it was road course, and it'd been nice to see Jade Buford back out there, given that he was pretty good at Portland. I don't know if he would have still been in the big accident like Reddick was. Yeah, that's another one to certainly look at. But I get what you're saying there for sure. I think that if you have a Cup driver that's struggling a lot more, like Suarez used to, it probably would feel more excusable to have him be in there. I think Ross Chastain is another good example. I mean, having a situation where Chastain was running a lot of Truck Series races here and there, even when he was going for the championship, nobody would have really cared, even though he was clearly trying to get into the Cup Series and just faced so many obstacles in doing so. But him getting in truck races now, with him being as dominant as he is now, I don't think it would be great to have him be, bushwhacker out there too. I see you mentioning Death Killer. You're mentioning Ty Dillon. That's another good example. Ty Dillon, is he probably the best driver out there now that doesn't have a Cup Series win? Hard to say. I think Reddick seemed like he was the clear choice after Briscoe got his win, and and some of these other guys. I guess that would probably be the next question, really. Who is the top guy that hasn't at all? I have to keep reminding myself that Christopher Bell's already won, so we can't talk about him. Yeah, would he be considered a bushwhacker? Well, I mean, he got in the 6 car there, and it was unfortunate that Ryan Vargas ended up not qualifying for the race as a result. And then on top of that, the 6 car had a cracked header and ended up not really being a factor in the race. Do I think Ty Dillon is as much of a threat? Maybe not, but then again, he does have such extensive experience in the Xfinity Series too. Somehow to me, Ty Dillon feels like he's much more on the same level as like a driver like JJ Yaley, who hasn't won in the Cup Series but has extensive experience in it, and he's still a regular in the Xfinity Series. It's unfortunate he missed the show as well. I thought he really could have made something happen in the 66 there. Hopefully they wouldn't have had the same problems that Roger had too, but or Rogers rather. That would be another one to look at too. But yeah, I don't know what you guys think of in terms of like different who would be the best driver that hasn't won a Cup race yet. I feel like I'm missing a very big name on that list already. Because now we've had Suarez. I think of that progression. You have Briscoe, you had Suarez, you have Reddick. And I'm thinking like, okay, somebody that maybe has about that same time, but is a full time driver in it. I mean, yeah, maybe it would be Ty Dillon. I mean, it could be. Somehow I'm having a hard time getting my head around that, but that could just be a personal thing. I'm not sure. But the 42 car, I mean, we don't see the 42 car have a whole lot of wrecks lately. I know that he was throwing a lot of fenders around at the Busch Clash earlier this year, but other than that, I don't usually think about it too much. But yeah, yeah, James, thank you for checking into the chat here as well. I appreciate you checking in here. Yeah, good runs for um, McDowell there as well, and Busher too for sure. MBM wins the next Cup race. Caleb Watkins, not sure about that. I don't know when. I heard one unconfirmed rumor that they're looking to just focus on their Xfinity program. That seems to just be from conjecture though, because definitely they really are just focusing on the Xfinity program. I guess we haven't seen their Cup car since what was it, Coda, when they had Boris Said in it. It's unfortunate though that I really expected them to be at Sears Point. I thought for sure they would do it, but that was probably the issue with the issue there too. Corey LaJoy, yeah, that's another one. Well, Cole Custer's already won, Philip, so you got that. Landon Castle, there's one. But yeah, Landon Castle, LaJoy. I'm not sure if I put LaJoy ahead of Ty Dillon. It's tricky. LaJoy just is having awful luck. I mean, not just the fact that he missed the start of this one, he was last at Gateway. Spire Motorsports has just had absolutely abysmal mechanical failures these last few rounds. It seemed like BJ McLeod's team was going to be kind of the favorite, if you could consider that the right term, for the last car championship. But I think LaJoy is still very much part of the standings. I think after his run here, he might have broken the bottom five tie with him there, but that'll be another one to kind of look at there too. Let's see. All right. I'm sorry. I'm just checking out my notes here too. Big thanks to William Saki here. He was just sending me another batch of notes here from the race. Hoping to put more of this in the article. I'll just read some of the bits he has here as well. He had a very brief interview. Apparently, they said there was a 60-second time limit on his interview with Loris Hesmans there. Loris is not a native English speaker, so his quotes came out a little bit messy. Okay, but he was able to transcribe. Well, kudos to them. Yeah, I didn't even think about the language barrier, of course, on that one. So there's certainly a challenge there too. Let's see. But yeah, he's got some good pictures here. We'll definitely share some of those in the chat here. He's got shots of the 27 crew kind of working under the rear deck on that car. Also, you see Corey LaJoy's car with the hood up there too. So we'll see how that looks. All right. Yeah. Oh, it looks like Loris Hesman's looking to run Indianapolis. Well, that would be good. Indianapolis will be our next race. Wow. Okay. Wow. Kudos. Yeah. Goodness. All right. Well, thank you again to William Saki again for the coverage here this weekend. We'll get the full notes here in the article later tonight here for you guys, but he does have some pictures and some content here from that indicating the situations here with the 27, the 7, and the 51 there being in the garage at one point or another. Actually, with the 77 here as well with Balicki. Garage area turned out to be a pretty busy place there, so I imagine this is a pretty challenging one here for him. But we'll get some more of that information for you in the feature here later tonight. So we got, let's see. Well, we didn't really talk about the finish of the Xfinity race. I guess we got a little bit of that with the battle there at the finish. Very surprised that Kyle Larson overdrove that corner and let Ty Gibbs get by him. But if you have a green-white checker in these races, Larson was going to win that race. He was going to win that by a pretty comfortable margin if that caution didn't come out. But as we see what happens all the time, and we almost saw it today, I think it would have been brutal for NASCAR to throw the caution, especially for just debris coming off the 3 car when there was already gravel on the track for Bubba Wallace running off course at that one point there, and they didn't throw a caution for that. And I appreciated the restraint with which they had on that because, of course, Road America has such long laps. I mean, I rewatched the Saturday race very quickly because there were so many cautions in that. Ended up being, I guess we only watched it in about an hour, when you take the commercial breaks and everything else out there. But that was another one to kind of look at there too. Yeah, congratulations to Ty Gibbs for the win. I mean, he's a shoe-in to get somebody's ride next year. I mean, I don't see Gibbs going. Well, Gibbs can't go to 5 cars because there's the 4 car cap, I guess, is still firm on that from the charter system. But we'll find out what happens on that side. There we go. Oh, I got the tweet from Small Budget Racing. Also had some great pictures this weekend. Thank you to him as well. Small Budget Racing 51 on Twitter with some great pictures. Saw a picture of a JD McDuffie shirt at the track there too. I thought that was pretty cool. So we got, yeah, kudos to him on that. Actually, that brought up the point that the McDuffie family has actually reissued the shirts, the one with the blue car on the front, as well as the red car version as well. Those are available at Jam Screen Printing. You can check out my Twitter feed on that. I posted the link on that as well earlier. So, oh, Lolo de Truff. Yeah, no, I did not say. Yeah, Hendrick does not have a charter in the Xfinity series. That's not true. Definitely. In fact, the 17, I believe, would have missed the show if there's any issue with weather because they hadn't had any attempts. So yeah, no, that's definitely not what I mean on that one there too. What's the dog doing? Steelworks? Yeah, he's still outside somewhere out there. He might sneak in here at some point, but we'll find out what happens here too. R Ohio, if you qualify for the Cup playoffs and secure a full-time ride declaring for points the following year, you're excluded from the lower series. Yeah, I mean something like that would be pretty easy. I think if you're having something where if you I wouldn't say. I mean, I don't want to. I'm sure some drivers will probably turn this around and say they're being punished for success. That like, oh, you got a full time Cup ride, so you better stay out of Xfinity and trucks. But that would probably be a good argument for it. And then if you lose a full time ride, if you're a driver like an AJ Allmendinger or a Justin Allgaier, and you go back down the ranks again, you're sent back down there not by choice. I think that should be encouraged because I think it's been great. I think for Allmendinger and for Allgaier, I bring them up a lot on the show because I think they're really good positive examples of drivers that are able to get back up there and when they do get back to Cup, I have no doubt that they'd be performing a lot better. Hopefully, it'll be. I think with Allgaier, he just needs to get better luck. Every time we've seen him in the 77 car, he just has terrible. Like he got last in the Bristol Dirt Race, last at Talladega last year. He got in the pit road wreck driving in relief of Jimmy Johnson in 2020. I don't think that's a reflection on his talent. I think he's just wrong place, wrong time in those situations. If he had a full time ride again, I think we'd see him perform at least appreciably better than he was with HGOD. And I think that's because of the runs he's had in the Xfinity series. So same thing with Allmendinger. I mean, Allmendinger, has been a blast to watch part time too. Matt DiBenedetto, same thing. Yeah, I mean, hopefully, he hasn't got to the point here where he's been able to get a good run there with the truck series. But hopefully, if it does take off and he can get some good runs there too, that'll be another one to look at too. Yeah, KBM to the Cup Series. Maybe Kyle Busch wants to be owner and driver, not instead of just running with Gibbs. That would be interesting to find out too. So let me see here. Okay, just checking my notes here at the same time. Yes, definitely want to talk about the movie as well, the Kyle Busch film. Yeah, the truck that Matt DiBenedetto, Lolo de Turf, yeah, or Truff. There you go. The truck that DiBenedetto's in is actually pretty good. He's got a good entry there. Not the top team, but yeah, definitely one that he can kind of reinvent himself in. Elliott Sadler, Mark Allen, that's another good one to bring up. Yeah, see, there's a lot of drivers that can try things out there. But yeah, I mean, I always figured that KBM would be something that that Kyle would kind of have as a fallback when he got into the Cup Series, which makes me wonder why they're wasting so many resources on Kyle just spanking the field in a truck race. I think it's pointless. And frankly, when he won Sears Point in the Truck Series race there, he came in, he answered 3 questions, and he left. Like it was pretty open and shut. So, which is disappointing because I figured, I mean, maybe he was more excited in Victory Lane than he was in the media center, which I guess with some drivers, especially him, you can't blame him too much for. But I don't know. That would be something kind of interesting to find out. Yeah, Cup Series has been the Xfinity Series since '82. Yeah, Earnhardt won the first Busch race at Daytona in '82. You're right, Donnie. And again, but again, the same thing that I always say. And again, people always, and I'm not saying you're bringing it up in this standpoint, but I've had a lot of people bring that up in a state as a gotcha moment here. I wasn't a fan of it back then either. I always viewed the Busch Series as the Cup Series with worse paint schemes. Like I was never really a big Busch Series fan coming up. And I didn't like when the Cup Series guys were in there. And I really didn't like it in the early 2000s when everybody followed the Kevin Harvick model and they were all going for the championship. And then we had to start talking about the Owners' Championship to make things interesting, where it was really pointless too. I thought it was just stupid. So I was never a big fan of that even back then. And it's too bad because I think I missed out on a lot of great races in the Busch series back then as a result. I mean, it's great with YouTube. You can watch the old ones now, and it's new to me. Yeah, I've never really been a big fan of the Cup Series guys running those lower series even back then. I didn't think it added anything to it. I think when it was ridiculous when Harry Gant was getting 4 straight wins in the Cup Series, and he's still running 2 Busch races and getting those races too. I mean, it's like, I get that you want to race whatever you can get your hands on, but he had no business being in the Xfinity Series at that point. You should be looking at that point of like trying to even go for a championship at that point. But obviously, the world of racing was different back then. But I still think it was no less unfair to have a Cup Series guy in there. Heck, the separation in talent was probably even larger back then between those and Xfinity Series regulars back then. And I've only really started to get into the Xfinity Series a lot more in recent years. Really, this last batch I think has been really good to see there too. But yeah, I didn't like it back then. I didn't like it when Mark Martin did it. I didn't pull for drivers who did do it. Jerry Nadeau wasn't messing around in the Busch series back then. Ricky Rudd, all that. Derek Cope did a little bit of that, but not anything to the extent of like a full time effort. So again, if you want what I always thought, at least from a viewer standpoint, is like, look, if I want to see Cup drivers, I'm going to watch a Cup race because I want to see them race at the most elite level. I want to see them, going out there. If I want to see Formula One drivers, I'm not going to I'm not going to pay money to buy a ticket to watch them run like some go-kart race against a bunch of kids somewhere. It's like, no, I want to go over there and I want to see them go against the best of the best. I want to see a race of some consequence here. I don't want to see somebody just go into a race where they're favored to win by a ridiculous margin. So, but again, I can't speak for everybody. I can just speak for myself on that, and that's gonna be kind of the difference there too. But yeah. So yeah, and again, a lot of this dovetails with the Kyle Busch documentary. And so I saw that this past week. I guess it was Wednesday night. And overall, I think it was pretty good. I felt like I left it with a little better grasp of who Kyle Busch is and maybe why he is the way he is, which was something I was kind of hoping the documentary would tackle. I was questioning the wisdom of doing a documentary like this at this point in his career. Because I would think like, okay, where's maybe a Jimmy Johnson documentary would be good because now maybe he's still active in IndyCar, but he's done full time in the Cup Series. That would be an interesting story to kind of do. It's like do a documentary on a story that's more or less complete. I mean, heck, I should be one to talk. I mean, I'm writing Derek Cope's book, and there's still new chapters being written all the time with him. Apparently one of Nitro Motorsports teams won today, not Derek's, but one of the other cars from that effort won today. But doing a Kyle Busch documentary where he's won 2 championships, and he's run all these other Xfinity and Truck Series races and everything. It handled some aspects I thought pretty well. I think probably one of the strongest parts of it, and again, some spoilers in here if you guys haven't seen it, because I know they just did a limited release of it. But I'll mention it here. So definitely mute this for a bit, and I don't know. I guess I'll indicate in the chat if you don't want to hear this part of it on that too. But I thought that the aspect with Ricky Hendrick's career, I thought that was handled really well. That I thought that the way that Ricky Hendrick kind of calmed Kyle Busch down a bit and kind of measured, because I was always wondering about that because it seemed like Kyle Busch was just such a poor fit for Hendrick from the outset because he was just so aggressive and outspoken and he was already getting booed before he even made any starts out there. I mean, I could never imagine Kurt Busch driving for Hendrick Motorsports, although he ended up driving a Hendrick car when he was driving for Phoenix Racing at one point. So but that really kind of filled that in a lot more. And then of course, when the plane crash happened and you lost Ricky Hendrick, you didn't have that connection out there, somebody to kind of calm him down or kind of like talk him through things, or kind of try to control, just the aggression that Kyle Busch has always really had behind the wheel. And obviously, racing against his brother, being a factor in that too. I like that Kurt was a big part of the story as well. And they would talk about how they would play off each other. I think the sibling rivalry aspect of it is certainly understandable. I like that Kurt brought up what I had heard back in 2003, that Kurt was saying like, "Wow, if you think I'm good, wait until my brother gets in the series," and that was certainly very true. And Kyle won his first race in 2005 in the Cup Series at Fontana. I think that the documentary could have probably been entirely about the 2015 season. I think that it almost felt like it was trying to do that, certainly by the way that it bookended the film. I think that it could have talked more about, the challenges he faced, certainly the injury at Daytona, and the context of that and all the stuff he had to endure. I thought that was chronicled pretty well. Some of the B-roll footage that was used kind of fudged a little bit about like what year it was showing, at other phases of his career. But the 2015 segment, I think, was kind of probably the strongest part of it. I felt that he probably could have gone more in depth into his physical therapy and what he had done exactly to do it. We saw a little bit of it, but it still felt like that was kind of rushed along a little bit because it was trying to do so much more about his career. It actually felt like it was kind of on the long side because of what it was, all the ground it was trying to cover. I felt like maybe doing his 2015 season and maybe referring back to earlier parts of his career through that year would have been an interesting way to go about it. But maybe, I don't know, maybe that wouldn't have played as well. But that was pretty good. And because I know that obviously he got a lot of criticism, of course, for winning the championship by not running all the races and getting the medical exemption, even though he had to win a race, even though he had to get in the top, 30 in points to get into the playoff contention. And then he had to actually kind of, get to the last round. I thought it was interesting that it left out a lot of the other competitors. Certainly mentioning Jeff Gordon in the championship race was one thing, but I thought that it really overlooked like Joey Logano's role in the championship. Certainly the wreck between him and Matt Kenseth. I mean, maybe that was too much stuff going on. But I mean, obviously that played a massive role in Kyle Busch even being a factor in the championship for much less actually punching his ticket to getting into that round. I felt that was kind of glazed over. What was kind of, and then also, and it must be said, the injury that started everything was because he was bushwhacking, was because he was in a Busch Series race that he really didn't have to be in. And and there was a quote from Jamie Little at one point saying like, "Oh, well, he runs in the Busch Series so he can knock the rust off." It's like he does that, the majority of his 220 plus wins is to knock the rust off. Sounds like there's no rust there. So I imagine I was trying to view it from the standpoint of somebody that maybe isn't as familiar with NASCAR or with Kyle Busch. They'd probably be wondering like, okay, well, why is he running all these other series? Why is he running all these different races? What is the Truck Series? What is the Xfinity Series? What are those to the Cup Series? I'm sure viewing it, you see a lot of similarities, and maybe to a casual viewer, they just like, oh, this is just another race. It's like, maybe everybody runs all these races, so I thought it was being needlessly elusive with the bushwhacking aspect when Kyle is by far, especially by getting more wins than Mark Martin, but I guess not less than Jack Ingram, the greatest, the driver that's been the most flagrant flaunter of those rules, especially given the fact that this is coming out a year after he's quote unquote retired from the Xfinity Series competition. I thought it would have been nice if I would have given him props if he just came in there and said it and said, look, I love getting in the Xfinity Series. I need to win. I have an insatiable desire to win, and I want to win a truck race. If it's a truck race against these guys, if it's an Xfinity race against these guys, I don't care. I just want to go in there and just win as many races as I can and forget everybody else. If he that's what I wait to hear any of these drivers or teams say. Just address it. Don't hide from it. I felt it was needlessly dodging it, and for Jamie Little to be the only one that was mentioning it, and not really Kyle Busch saying anything about it, especially when the decision to do so contributed to him getting that injury in 2015. Um, it would have been something to actually kind of address. I feel like the people that were putting the documentary together were probably just so excited to do it that they didn't want to ask anything controversial. But I think that would have been well worth asking. It would have been interesting to kind of get that view of it there, because especially since it actually went into the aspect of people criticizing his 2015 championship by not starting all the races. I think if you're going to go into that controversy, you may as well go into this part of it too. So that was strange. I thought that was a little strange, and it reminded me kind of the Bubba Wallace documentaries that have come out, where it's stuff is told kind of out of order, or it presented in just a way that it doesn't really inform the audience a little bit. It's just kind of things that happen, but there's no like connection between things. That was a little frustrating. I mean, it even glazed over all the other years where he's trying to win another championship. You could have really started the thing with the 2015 championship, and then his pursuit to win a second championship, to really shut up people that said like, oh, hey, now I won a full season championship. I thought that was skipped over too much. I thought that would have been a really interesting stretch of it. But again, and it sounds like Kyle's actually been pretty critical of the film himself, at least from the initial reviews that he was talking about too. So maybe, I don't know what aspects he would have liked to have been in there. Yeah, I think that would have been. I thought that would have been interesting to really. I thought that would have been interesting to cover. So I was surprised it wasn't a part of it. I guess I wasn't too surprised. I mean, it's his thing at the end of the day. He's going to have what's in there that he wants in there, and he's going to have left out generally what he wants left out. But it was strange. It was strange because, but again, if you're going to do this, if you're going to do a documentary about your career and how you're the winningest guy in NASCAR, you're the most controversial guy, and you have more than 220 wins, and then and not mention the time where everybody's like, oh wait, Richard Petty had 200 wins, and those short track races should be treated the same as a truck race or a Busch race that Kyle Busch was in. Like why? I love that wasn't in there either, because that was just a whole media circus when that all happened, when he got the 200 combined wins and somehow trying to weigh them equally. And the dishonesty of saying, oh, we're not weighing them equally. And then weighing them equally, then saying, oh, that's 199. And it's like, I don't know. But, I think, it's, it was strange. It was strange. But it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. I mean, I just think that it reminded me, again, and I don't want to put, I don't want to put this viewer, on the defensive, because I thought it was a good idea. I just think it wasn't the right time. Somebody suggested to me a while back about doing a documentary on Ross Chastain. And, my answer was like, well, look, his story isn't finished being written yet. Like there's a lot that's going on, but by the time, I would finish something like that, there's a whole lot of other stuff that will be going on. And this was back when he was driving at Ganassi. And then I certainly never anticipated that he would go to Trackhouse and then be as dominant as he's been this year. That's kind of what this Kyle Busch documentary felt like. And even in the caption, they kind of described it that way, where they said like he won the first two of what will unquestionably be multiple Cup Series championships. It's like, well, I mean, if he stops messing around in the Truck Series, yeah, maybe, but I don't know. So, overall, I mean, it was interesting, but it was strange, and it felt I wasn't entirely satisfied with what it was leaving out of the actual discussion. So that was a little too bad. But again, I think some of that is a consequence of doing a documentary on a driver that's still active, and has, I mean, certainly the 2015 thing was a big part. But again, you probably could have done just a documentary on just what happened to him in 2015, or 30 for 30 or something like that. I thought that would have been fine, and really trying to kind of understand it. I think that's where I kind of draw the comparisons with the Bubba Wallace one, where, maybe the Bubba Wallace documentary, the objective was, okay, people are, he's been in the news a lot lately. We need to kind of clear these stories up. We need to kind of make sure that people understand this is what happened. This is not what happened here. This is who he is. This is what his background is. And okay, now you can feel however you want, however you want to feel about him. I think in both those documentaries, I think I already wrote an article on one of them. I think they weren't entirely successful at doing that, and in fact, kind of made me question if that was their objective at all. The Kyle Busch documentary kind of makes me feel the same way, where he wants to again kind of express himself as being a really, the face of the sport. I think really, and kind of really saying something to his detractors and saying, look, like this is, I am the driver that has this many wins. I am this dominant in these series, and really calling out Dale Jr. during it. I thought that was the other thing that was interesting, is the dynamic between him and Jr., where I always viewed the incidents that happened back in 2008, for example, as the media just playing it up. It's like, oh, he spun him out. He spun out the sport's most popular driver, and it's like, I mean, okay, yeah, fine. I mean, it's whatever. But I mean, there's always been that portion of the media that's always views NASCAR as Junior and friends. That Junior is going to get the most attention, and everybody else is everybody else. That's why I think the sports actually needed to be more aggressive with how well they described the rest of the field once Junior retired. But that's a whole other discussion. But I thought the dynamic between the two of them was really interesting. I like that they interviewed Junior and got his side of it there, because that was something I felt like I was hearing for the first time. Because I didn't know how much of that was going on behind the scenes. So that was interesting to see. Of course, you think back to the Texas thing where Junior drove Kyle Busch's car and then ultimately getting the ride at Hendrick Motorsports. That was interesting. So I'm glad that was approached. I guess my biggest complaint is I wish that the other aspects of his career were tackled as honestly and as in depth. And maybe the result of that probably would have been something a lot longer than, an hour and a half documentary. But, how long is the Michael Jordan documentary or these other ones or other major figures in the sport that make it a multi-part thing? They could have done that too. So I don't know. Yeah, I wish the bushwhacking thing was tackled a bit more honestly. And yeah, I would have loved it. I would have been like, if Kyle Busch literally said, like I said earlier, and said like, it's like, oh, here, it's like, look, I get in the cups, I win cup races, but that's not enough for me. I want to get in the Xfinity series and truck series and show I'm the best in those series, show my team is the best. And I don't care who I face in that series or what they're doing. That's not my problem. And if he just say it, it's the dishonesty of the bushwhacking that always gets to me. And this movie did nothing to really change that. But it wasn't that film's objective. The film's objective was to be at least to me, it seemed like it was to feature, it's like maybe to say to people that, don't like Kyle Busch, that they don't understand him, that they don't understand that this is what he's gone through, that they don't understand this is how he thinks, or that they don't understand that these are the people that were around him, that maybe, that had this influence on him, and or people that are with him that had an influence on him that are no longer with us. That was helpful. It accomplished that to a degree. I just don't think it accomplished it as well as it could have. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it too. But I don't know on that. Let me see here. We'll get back into our next part here. I'm just going to mention in the chat here. Movie discussion. Let's see. I'm just going to put the thing in the chat there, showing that if anybody did mute things during the discussion there of the movie for Kyle Busch there. It's strange to think of spoiler warnings, so I guess for a movie that's about a real life figure, but there you go. But I just putting that in there in case anybody is muting it. So we'll go ahead and get into the rest of our discussion here tonight. We'll do our trivia segment here. I do have some stuff for show and tell here as well. Let's see if do we have any other announcements on technical inspection yet? I haven't really looked on this side here. We'll kind of look into that. I don't see anything here. No, it's been okay. We just got the unofficial results here so far. Yeah, spoiler over. Yeah, I put a timestamp on here, but I had no idea how long I was going to ramble about that. So we'll go from there on that. Okay, we talked about that. Oh, speaking of Bubba Wallace, I touched on him a little bit in the movie review part of this here. One thing I thought was kind of strange, and I know Bubba and how he gets covered in anything is always kind of put under the microscope these days. I was a little surprised in how much traffic, how much news his arguing with Booty Barker on the radio was getting this past week. I was weird. I just thought it was kind of strange that that story was getting as much legs as it was getting, because if you listen to a lot of these drivers, they get really frustrated with their teams. I mean, Kyle Busch, for example, or Kurt Busch, or any of these other guys, have said way more over the radio. I mean, I've listened to the actual radio transcript with Booty Barker and all that. I didn't think it was anything that exceptional, really, in terms of like something that was particularly newsworthy. I mean, he's gone through a really frustrating stretch, and I think that's worth talking about. And obviously, it's been getting a lot of attention that he's been dealing with issues with the pit crew that have cost him some good runs and perhaps even chances at other victories. All the cars he had to pass at Kansas a while back. And then, of course, the frustrations he was having at Nashville. And Nashville, I mean, on top of everything else, it was a very hot race. Yes, you got these cars with better ventilation than they used to have. But I'm sure that was as much of a factor there too. I just thought it was kind of a non-story. So I was I thought it was strange that it was getting as much traction as it was getting. And I don't think it was getting a lot of attention from people that already maybe aren't that big into Bubba Wallace or not big Bubba Wallace fans. It seemed like he was getting a lot of media attention. And so I'm like, is this something really, is something else like happening here with this behind the scenes that I'm not knowing about? Or does this indicate something more than that? I don't know. Maybe people just grabbed onto it because it was something that really kind of captured the issues he's having with his pit crew, where he's now, venting those frustrations with his crew chief. But I didn't find that story particularly. I don't know. I didn't think it was anything particularly exceptional beyond the frustrations that any of these teams have. It's easy to forget, when you have a driver that wins and maybe you have a couple other guys that have good runs, the rest of the field is going to be pretty unhappy, and they're not going to really want to talk to anybody. I can't imagine trying to talk to Kyle Busch after the race he had today, or any of these other drivers out there that were well back in the lineup, and just probably would have like a 1 or 2 word answer to their interviews. That's just the nature of it there. So, and unfortunately, Wallace found himself in another situation there. I think that there's some there's some stories that I think are worthy of like getting a whole lot of discussion and all that, but I didn't feel that that one was particularly. I don't know. I didn't think that that was particularly exceptional, but and yeah, it could be one that maybe just everybody caught. I mean, I see your comment there, Lolo. I mean, that's possible that maybe it was a situation where just enough people heard about it. But again, a lot of the reporting nowadays seems like it's just like somebody gets it, and how many other people are adding to the conversation. I didn't think there was too much more to add. Yeah, Kevin Harvick, that's another one to talk about. Yeah, any driver that's unhappy on the radio, I thought it was pretty tame by those comparisons. I mean, heck, some of these last place battles I hear where guys are just like beside themselves that a car is broken down at the opening laps. I mean, you're not going to hear too many people that are going to be happy in those situations, but they certainly don't get the same amount of traffic that these other stories do. So I don't know, but that's another one to kind of look at there too. I think that's most of the news I had on here. One other thing on the broadcast. I think we had a little bit of this earlier today. Is something I kind of miss from older broadcasts that it feels like we don't really get these days because it's too much like the broadcasters asking each other questions or trying to figure out the strategies or things of that nature. It seems like you used to have a lot of broadcasts that would bring up the history a bit more within the context of it. When was the last time that you heard a commentator say like, "Oh, this reminds me of this race from 5 years ago at this track," where something like this happened between, like maybe like a wreck plays out in a similar way. I was watching a race from, I think it was the Martinsville race in 1998, and ESPN had a wreck at the very beginning of it where Darrell Waltrip and Jeff Burton hooked fenders and basically took each other out of the backstretch. And Benny Parsons chimed in and said that, "Oh, this reminds me of a wreck that happened here in 1990 between Ricky Rudd and Ken Schrader," and it was indeed in the same spot. Now I know that there's a lot of new venues these days, like Road America today, that doesn't have a whole lot of history. But even in those cases, there's nothing that you can bring into a commentary and say, well, this is almost like what happened at this point, or reminds me of this. Like, I wonder why that's kind of gone by the wayside a bit. Mike Joy would do that sometimes in the Fox booth, But then I always kind of got irritated where some of the other commentators, especially Clint Boyer at the time, would kind of be a bit more, kind of dismissive of him bringing that stuff up and just kind of, and then the conversation doesn't become about the thing he's bringing up. It's about the fact that he's remembering something from a long time ago and basically just, saying like, oh, Mike Joy is old. It's like, well, yeah, but okay, great. Way to cut off the conversation there. I just wish that the NBC crew would endeavor to do something like that. I think Junior tries to do that at points, because of course I think he is a very good student of the sport, not just from what he does on his podcast and back in the day and the other shows he used to do at the same time. But I just don't think there's a good enough outlet for it. I think it's buried in too much more of what's going on in the broadcast. And again, the same thing that happens where, again, it connects to the issue I brought up earlier, where again, there's too many broadcasters in the booth, or frankly, just doing what's going on there and at NBC there too. But that's something I wish I'd see a bit more of. But I don't know if we'll get to that point. I'm seeing in the comments we have an announcement there on the tech inspection. And it looks like Reddick's cleared. Yes, indeed. 5 minutes ago, Bob Pockris, tech is complete. Reddick is the winner. No cars to R&D. So congratulations once again to Tyler Reddick on his first Cup Series victory, the 6th first-time winner and the 13th different winner this season. Fantastic run for him. Congratulations to him and the 8 crew. I guess the one thing that was mentioned during the broadcast today that was historically significant was the last time the 8 car carried a driver to the first win was Dale Jr. in 2000. So that was cool. So we at least got that. I mean, that's some kind of step towards that. But again, more towards the moments between things, whether it's a wreck, whether it's some little incident on pit road, scene vault level details, little details that maybe people wouldn't immediately know about, or maybe kind of forgotten because so many things happen in any one race, and then you kind of forget a lot of it the next week. That would be the kind of thing I think would be great to see make a return for that too. But yeah, let's see. Well, yeah, there you go. Well, yeah, Donnie Hodgkins, you mentioned that too. Exactly. You have the race back in 1956. Where's the other additional information of the inaugural race at Road America back then? I mean, it doesn't have as much modern history there, but I mean, in terms of going back to 56, absolutely. That's something else that could have been brought up more. It was being brought up on social media a good amount. I think somebody brought up that they were like a member of the family of one of the people that started that race. So that would be another one to kind of check out too. But I don't know. We'll see how that shakes out. But congratulations again to Tyler Reddick, and it will be a Loris Hezemans article tonight here on the Last Car page. So we'll check out Williams' notes, and we'll get that together for you guys, and that'll be something to kind of check out there too. Alrighty. So we'll get into our trivia portion here. We'll do show and tell here next, because I do have a couple things here to show to you guys here. So again, the categories again on our little Tiger Electronics deal here for our last segment for tonight. Again, NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are our categories. NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. So those are definitely ones to talk about there too. And yes, if you guys have any other questions you'd like me to cover there, definitely drop them in the chat here as well. And we'll do this in just a moment here. H. Gale, you had a question about Tim Veens and the comments on Twitter. To answer your question, he has not responded to my request for an interview. He's not the only other, he was basically the only major one I really wanted to kind of hear back from. I did contact somebody else to kind of get some more context on the rules that were at play, but I didn't get a comment on that. But that was okay, because I felt like I got another information there. But yeah, the Tim Veens situation, I'd love to interview him. I'd love to get his side of it. I've been an open book since even before I did the article on that. Unfortunately, we don't have any new traffic on that, so hopefully we'll have some more information on that. Otherwise, we're still going to be covering them just as much as any other team. I mean, you can't play favorites when it's the last place battle there, so we're going to be doing that. It sounded like bridges are thoroughly burned between Travis McCullough and Tim Veens there. Although I was interested to see that Veens was mentioning Mason Philippi running at Mid-Ohio. That was the part that I thought was most unusual, because Philippi sounded like he was very not satisfied with that truck at Sears Point. I don't know if they made changes to it in advance of Mid Ohio, or if they're going to run the same truck or not. If it's the same black and red one that Stephen Parsons was in that blew the oil all over the place, that'll be interesting. That's something I'll be watching for. I guess that's next week in conjunction with the Atlanta Cup and Xfinity weekend. Seeing your comment there, James Swan. Yeah, anybody who had the best Cup career, Ricky Rudd, Dale Jr., or Jeff Burton? Very tough. They all have about the same number of wins, don't they? That's a good question. I think there's a lot of things you can kind of look at there. Um, I mean, my goodness, that's a hard one. That's a hard one to measure. All it seems like all three of them were pretty close to winning championships at some point. Rudd had those couple of second place runs, 91 and 2001. Junior, he had, 2004 was a fantastic year for him. 2014 was as well. And then Jeff Burton, yeah, I don't know. I guess you can look at when their careers kind of dropped off a bit. Junior seemed like, he was having kind of a career renaissance with Steve Letarte there, and unfortunately things didn't shake out. Jeff Burton had an extended period of time kind of in the end of his career where he really wasn't a factor for wins, which was too bad. I'd probably go between Junior and Rudd on that. I might say Rudd because of sheer longevity. Although Junior's career was quite long as well. I wouldn't say 2000 to what 2017, or I guess if you go back to 99 with his first Cup start. I mean that was a pretty long time there. But I think Rudd was just a bit more because he had some of those shorter seasons. Certainly the Ironman streak that he beat Terry Labonte with, and I'm a bit partial to Rudd as well because I always like the Tide ride as well. I'm trying not to factor that into it. I do think it's very close between Rudd and Junior. Junior, of course, being much more popular than Ricky Rudd was. I think that has to be factored in too. I probably want to say Rudd. I probably say Rudd. I think for a more challenging period in the sport, a more transformative period, he had to drive many more different kinds of cars during his career. The car tomorrow was just introduced in his last couple of seasons. Yeah, I'd go with Rudd on that. I think that's a good question though. So anyway, we got a couple things here for our show tonight. One thing here, our staff writer William Saki actually sent this in the mail here just recently. I got a new JD McDuffie here for the collection. This I thought was interesting. This is a 1994 reproduction of his Rumpel Furniture Pontiac. And what's very interesting on this is I've only seen these made as banks, where it has the black windows all around and the coin slot on the back. This actually has the clear windows and the driver's seat on the inside there. So really nice detail on it. And I like it has the Hoosier tires and everything on this too. So I just got this in this week here, and I definitely wanted to again express my thanks to him here. And it looks like he's done a great job there at the track too. Very very happy with the writers that we have on the website here, both William Saki and Ben Schneider. Ben, working with him over at the Sonoma Raceway here a couple weeks ago, is very happy to sign his copy of the JD book that he brought to the track there as well, and had a great time there too. So hopefully we'll have a race one of these days where it's all three of us there, and then we'll cover last place from any number of different directions there, and that would be really exciting there at the same time. So big thanks to William there on that as well. Another thing I got to show you here too, from another of our supporters here on the website. Back in February, I had received a message from Michael Juskowitz, who is a very talented artist that does some great motorsports artwork here. And he said, look, he was basically asking, look, dude, I got to get one of those programs to the Busch Clash there when you attend the race. So I was able to beat the crowds, and I got him a copy of the program there, and I sent it over to him. And he was really cool, and he sent a couple of drawings to me in exchange. And I definitely want to show him on the show tonight because I thought he did a masterful job on both of them here. So there's one of them there. First one here, let's get this one checked out here, is the shot of Jeff Burton's car from 2006. We actually just talked about Jeff Burton here. I guess we had to talk about Jeff Burton versus Junior or Rudd. Always a sucker for the bright orange here, and beautiful job on this one here. The old Singular Wireless car here that he won Dover with. I like how he kind of superimposed the Singular logo in the background. You only kind of get it out of the glare there a bit so you can see that a little better. And did a really nice job on that one. So there was that one he sent, and then also in here, Where did I put it? This is a portfolio I keep with some of my older drawings that I've done as well. But guys like Mike, as well as Rob Taylor, another one that you've seen some of his artwork on this show here too. They're in another league. I mean, what they can do with colored pencils is just amazing. Here's another one here that will look familiar. For those of you on Rise of the Field Fillers, check this out. An Andy Belmont drawing here of the 1992 FDP Brakes car. He had this sheet here with Belmont's signature when he drove the 26 car, I believe in ARCA, and he did this drawing on the same page there of the car. I figured that would be. I actually commissioned this one here from him because I figured a teal car is something you don't usually see too much of, and that was one that he always mentioned kind of stood out on the track. Andy did in his interview. So again, did a really nice job on that one, and I want to make sure to show that on there too. And yeah. So he sent that over, and he also sent over a copy of a picture of J.D. McDuffie's car from the 1988 wreck he had at Daytona after the car was getting towed into the garage area. I believe you could see that picture on his Twitter feed. I think he posted that earlier there. He included that as well. So a big thank you to Michael Juskowitz as well. If you check out his Twitter feed as well, he has great artwork that he's done. He did one of JD a while back. Actually, let me show you that too, because that'll tie this all together. He's also the one that did this one here on this side here. Tremendous job on this. I keep this right next to Rob Taylor's version of it that he did back in 2013. This one here as well. So again, different depictions there of the L.C. Whitford car at Watkins Glen, and those there too. So something a little different for our show and tell segment here this week, but definitely wanted to show you those here on the show tonight. So where are we with the categories here? We'll do a couple of questions to wrap it up. I see 2 for tracks. I see 2 for teams. I see 2 for drivers. Okay, it's pretty close across the board here. Let's see. Let's do tracks here, because I think we haven't done that one as much here lately between those 3. So here we go. So first question here for tonight, folks. Who were races at the Rock named after from 1982 through 1984? Don't look it up. Go ahead and try to guess on this one here. Who were races at the Rock named after? It's 2 pages here. Let me make sure to phrase that correctly. Who were races at the Rock named after from 1982 through 1984? Alex, yeah, some of the artwork, I might do that in a video at some point. I should do that, because I do have some of the stuff here that was from a children's book I was working on in 2007. I've shown stuff I did even further ago, back in 2001, on kind of my season review drawing. I think those are already in the Patreon, so you can check those out. But yeah. The question again here, first question of the night: who were races at the Rock named after from 1982 through 1984? So I guess as a race sponsor name, perhaps. It's phrased a little strangely, but that's a way to look at it. All right, we got guesses for Rocky Johnson, Dwayne. Yeah, there you go. I know it sounds like that would be it, but yeah, definitely a late '90s thing. I don't even know if The Rock. I'm not a big wrestling fan, so I don't know how far back The Rock's career goes. It was interesting enough when he came up in the Hermie Sadler video during that time period. Jiraj Slafkowski, Beast of Metal. You always present me the most challenging ones here. All right, here we go. Who are races at the Rock named after from 1982 through 1984? The answer is Warner Hogden. Easy for me to say. Warner Hogden, like we saw on the Trans Am car earlier this year when they did the throwback to the old Butch Mock entries. I believe that was Mock's kid that was driving that. Warner Hogden. So yeah, a couple of you got that. Maserati 9, you got it just ahead of Charles Peterson. So there you go. That one's too easy. That one is also too easy. That one's too easy. Jeez, these are too easy. Oh, I think we might have had this one, but we'll go ahead and do it again. What quarterback was Grand Marshal at the 1998 Trans-South Financial 400? What quarterback was Grand Marshal at the 1998 Trans-South Financial 400? Ole Anderson was nicknamed Rock in the 80s. Well, there you go. Or nicknamed Rock in the 80s. There you go. Learn something new every day. Yeah, Al, good question. I think we touched on this a little bit earlier in the show, but yeah, Road America being on the schedule, I hope it stays. I don't, I think it's an interesting venue, but I do think it's also a track that is very much a victim to the modern approach to broadcasting and certainly to stage racing. I know I haven't really talked about the stage racing aspect of it tonight, but I definitely share a lot of the comments that came out today where, it's just stage racing just screws up strategy at the road courses. And I agree with that. I thought we had enough of it that was interesting in the race to an extent, but I think it would have been a lot more interesting if, you didn't have those cautions. If you have natural cautions that happen that break up the action, those happen in unpredictable moments. And, the strategy kind of gets tossed up a bit more interestingly that way. We saw a little bit of that at the Xfinity race when you had a couple wrecks that were between the cautions there, and then you had people pitting at those points. Yeah. I hope it stays on there, but again, I hope the broadcasting improves enough that maybe a race like that, even if a race doesn't seem like it's having a lot happening, is shown a bit better. Because there was a lot happening in the garage area, I'll tell you that. They could have at least done that. And I think some of the other, the ways it played out would have been covered a bit better. I'm glad they were at least showing Reddick and Elliott racing each other off pit road. That was exciting. And then racing each other on the track. That was probably the best lap of the entire race from what we saw. I'll be interested to hear from William what the other view is on that. What quarterback was Grand Marshal of the 1998 Trans-South Financial 400? The answer is Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw is the answer. Maserati 9 got it. Dan Marino's a good guess, but he was the Grand Marshal for the 500 that year. Tom Brady, not quite. Joe Montana, nope. Dan Marino's a good guess, but it was the 98 500 that he was the Grand Marshal for, appropriately in Florida, so that makes sense too. Oh wow, we actually got our JD McDuffie question on the old thing here. How about this? Where did JD McDuffie earn his only career Busch pole? Where did JD McDuffie earn his only career Busch pole? Where did JD McDuffie earn his only career Busch pole is the question. Gus Ferrode? Ferrade. That's a tough one. That's a tough one, Beast of Metal. You got some good ones. The Juraj one is still pretty good. That one's a little bit easier to work your way through somehow. All right, and a lot of you guys got it. The answer where JD McDuffie earned his only career pole, and of course it is Dover, the Monster Mile. Johnny Carlino, looks like you were the first one on that, just ahead of Beast of Metal on that one. Nürburgring, yeah, that would be quite something. And yes, indeed, Charleston, yep, he won that pole. Charles Peterson, he won the pole on McCreary tires. That is correct. Let's see. Here we go. What track saw Dale Earnhardt move ahead of Mark Martin in points for 1990? What track, not what race, what track saw Dale Earnhardt move ahead of Mark Martin in points for 1990? Don't look it up. I know there's a very easy way to look it up, but we're not doing that. What track saw Dale Earnhardt move ahead of Mark Martin in points for 1990 is the question. I'm getting some better ones here. I'm getting some good ones. Getting a few of these mixed in here. Displaced Heath Schuler in Washington in the late 90s. That's the spelling I've seen of his name. Well, how about that? I'm afraid I don't follow football quite that closely, Beast of Metal, but thank you for the statistic there. What track saw Dale Earnhardt move ahead of Mark Martin in points for 1990? All right, we got several guesses for Phoenix, Atlanta, Charlotte, Rockingham, Richmond, Martinsville, Wilkesboro. Several good guesses. Here we go. I guess this assumes he only did it once, or not sure. What track saw Dale Earnhardt move ahead of Mark Martin in points for 1990? The answer is Phoenix. Phoenix indeed. Joey Fairbanks and many others of you got that one correct. Phoenix. All right. All right, we got one more question for tonight. Last question for the evening, folks. Who won the first NASCAR race at Michigan International Speedway? Who won the first NASCAR race at Michigan International Speedway? Yeah, this show's got a lot to talk about, exactly. Well, I ended up having a pretty stacked amount of notes here on the phone here, Death Killer, so I want to make sure I got through those. And then, of course, I had yet another rant on bushwhackers, so that'll fill the show quite a bit, too. But yeah, we're up to 2 hours. My goodness. Thank you so much for tuning in here, folks, on your 4th of July weekend there. Hope you're having a great weekend for you guys out there. We'll wrap it up here with this question here on the Michigan track. Who won the first NASCAR race at Michigan International Speedway? Got guesses for King Richard, Bobby Allison, David Pearson, Yarborough. The penultimate race. There you go. Who won the first NASCAR race at Michigan International Speedway? Hey there, Racer 10-106-2000. Sounds like a phone number. There you go. Okay, guesses for Jeff Gordon. All righty, here we go. Last question for the evening. Who won the first NASCAR race at Michigan International Speedway? The answer is Cale Yarborough. They named him Cale. They called him Cale. Cale Yarborough is indeed the correct answer here. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in here. Congratulations again to Tyler Reddick for the victory today at Road America. And last place feature on Loris Hesmans will be coming up later tonight, which will be co-written by both myself and our staff writer, William Saki, working at the track this weekend. Also have William's article for the IndyCar race coming up here for you guys. In the meantime, we got the website again is lastcar.info. Patreon is patreon.com/lastcaronbrock. Twitter feed is at lastcaronbrock. And our next show is going to be after the Atlanta race weekend next Sunday as we return to the disfigured Atlanta Super Speedway there in the Georgia foothills there, as well as I guess we got the Truck Series race in Mid-Ohio. So that'll be interesting to find out. So yeah, that's going to be our next show here. We'll be here about 15 minutes after the checkered flag to talk about it. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you guys next time.